Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode number 40. This is the after show for the Warlords of Draenor 6.0 Raiding Azeroth interview with Mr. Ian Hazzikostas.
Yes.
Yes. You think? Is it, Anna? Are we sure?
I'm sure it's the after show.
Are you sure? He's right here. Is that who this guy is right here? Is that who this is?
Yes, we are interviewing Ian Hazzikostas. I've been wanting to do this for about 6 months, ever since BlizzCon. So it's been a long time in coming. Hopefully he'll come back on the show again.
We can only hope.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. So there was one big topic that I moved from the main show to the after show. It wasn't like a lot of time consuming, but I just had to push it back here. It was I want to talk a bit about the with the new style of raids in Warlords, mostly because of the rebalancing system and how things are going to be different for ranged, melee, and healers and tanks. Can you give us any comments on mechanics and encounters we might be seeing again? So I know you've already talked about how raids are going to be more Ulduar-esque laid out and not just like one straight line like Throne of Thunder. What about like vehicle battles, or how about like healer encounters, like Dreamwalker kind of stuff like that? Just go into it. You see the notes. What do you think?
Well, so I think the main thing we've taken away from several expansions worth of WoW raiding right now is that people love vehicles. And so we actually...
we love vehicles. We just want lots and lots of vehicle fights.
What did I do?
We think that actually we can solve a lot of our class balance problems by putting all classes into vehicles. That we also worry about, Warlocks versus Shadow Priests. Not a thing anymore when you're just,
when you're a tank.
Exactly, when you're a Demolisher. Who cares about multi-dotting? It's no problem.
This guy doesn't troll ever. He's always 100% dead serious. Just you
trolling?
follow
I don't
him
know
on
what that
Twitter.
is.
Everything on Final Boss is canon. Gosh.
Yes, no. So yeah, no major vehicle battles planned. I think one of the big things that we want to do a lot more of is environmental integration. I think that we saw how successful it was with a fight like Blackfuse, where we really could custom build a room from the ground up to suit an encounter. And so I think that's something that occurs in a number of places. Imagine fighting a boss in the Blackrock Foundry on a set of moving conveyor belts that turn on and off with massive stamping presses overhead that periodically turn on and come down because you're actually on an assembly line for stamping out molds from huge blocks of molten ore.
Ooh.
Imagine rooms that are destroyed around you. Imagine not one, but two, and in fact even more trains. Fighting around trains, fighting on trains. There's some interesting stuff coming your way.
Oh, I see.
Fascinating.
Not one, but two trains. Okay.
Looking a little further into that, since you did go into this topic just a moment, and we've had a bunch of people ask us about this, can you give us any hints for like awesome boss mechanics that we're likely to see in Warlords? That what should we be excited about?
Everything I just said, pretty much. Like
everything, always. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much. I mean, I think.
Can you describe any bosses? I mean, can we get any hints, or is it just going to be like, oh, I guess you'll see when it's an alpha?
Well, a little bit of that, but no. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I can give you rundowns of specific fights, I suppose, but I don't know if that sounds really interesting to talk about. So, no. I mean, ultimately, we don't have any one crazy new thing like. Vehicles were clearly the thing in Wrath of the Lich King. It was like, okay, we have this new vehicle tech. We're going to really, really make sure that we have this new tech.
Sure.
Probably the new thing that we had in Mists was the ability to push and pull you around. We used that a bit more subtly, I hope, than vehicles to kind of complement certain fights, but didn't really build anything entirely around it.
Yeah.
I think really in Warlords, there isn't that one shining thing. I think it's more just about learning lessons and building upon our experience with design to make encounters that feel epic or well integrated with their surroundings and draw upon all the art that we have available. And also, there's definitely something we've learned in terms of the choose your own adventure model you mentioned earlier. Fights that, are not puzzles in the sense of, you're doing the Towers of Hanoi thing while the rest of your raid's fighting a boss.
Right.
But more in the sense of figuring out the right order to activate certain abilities or to deal with certain adds. And that's, I think, a hallmark that recurs over the course of a number of different encounters.
There was actually an MMO that did implement a Towers of Hanoi type puzzle.
I wonder what that one's called. I wonder if chat room.
What MMO actually?
I can't imagine.
Hey, I don't know. I don't know. Babe.
I don't know. My glass is really close to my mouth right now. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it is technically May the 4th be with you.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's a Hallmark Old Republic thing. Like, if you go all the way back
there you go. There it is.
to KOTOR, like all of those, like even the single player RPGs, right? They always work Towers of Hanoi somewhere.
Yeah, they do
In the game. That's kind of why I mentioned it.
Yeah, that's kind of why. I heard you. I knew what you're doing there. You're setting me up.
Well, I have another question, Babe, just because I've been paying attention to chat. But if you want to take,
well, yeah, I guess the only thing I was wondering about too. Are we ever gonna have, I guess, any raid rewards for exceptional execution outside of just achievements or just the mount that drops off the end bosses, which I bring up like the no wipe, Trial of the Grand Crusader sort of stuff. Is there anything that might come back in that regard?
No specific plans there.
Okay.
Other than top ranks on the Warcraft logs execution boards.
Oh, well, there you go.
Clearly, that's
quoting
the prize.
The correct site. Thank you.
The prize that every guild truly desires. No, I mean, I think there was definitely some frustration that resulted from the no-fail achievements and rewards that we had back in the day. I think Immortal only really, really worked because Nax was pretty easy.
Okay.
And even then, you have the frustration of someone disconnects on Thaddeus or something goes wrong, and really through no fault of your own, just due to the internet, you lose out on this thing. I think we're happy with just kind of letting guilds that have content on farm just have that as part of the challenge of just personal betterment, trying to get a faster kill every week, trying to get a cleaner kill every week. And then that feels good. That just kind of lets you demonstrate mastery of the content, but we don't need to go in and like give a special carrot to chase.
Okay. Sounds fine. Anna, what'd you have? And before I go into other topics for after show, what'd you got?
Well, I've had quite a few people in chat. Actually, this is something that's come up in chat much more than it came up before the show. Ask about challenge modes. And I know that as someone who's had his hands in every bit of PvE design, that you definitely had quite a bit of input into how challenge modes were designed in Mists.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect in Warlords for challenge modes, especially since I know you guys have not been a huge fan of the time trial device, and that, time trials are not like the be-all, end-all of judging how awesomely people do at challenge modes. What can we expect? What should we see?
Well, I think there's two parts to this. We'd like to give people a reason to do challenge modes outside of just the pure speedrun audience, and we think that ultimately gear rewards are going to help with that. Early on, doing the random daily challenge mode, which just requires completion, will give you a piece of loot that's better than anything you get from a heroic dungeon. It will be low-end raid quality. It will be an epic. So you can kind of get a little bit of progression out of that, and that's something that people can do as catch-up in the future on alts if they don't want to do LFR. And that's just something that we'd like to incentivize. But in terms of the medal structure, that is going to remain time-based and focused around a speedrun orientation. I think the main thing there is just learning lessons from how the system as a whole played out over the course of Mists. I think that one of the great challenges of dealing with challenge modes in a live environment is that we couldn't really fix a lot of the problems that we saw without disrupting the leaderboards and without disrupting the competitive environment. With the exception of like a couple of extreme bugs, even things that were clearly loopholes, like what everyone does with multi-clicking on the spirits at the end of Shadowpan, for example. Like, clearly that's a bug, and it's the kind of thing we would normally fix in a second, but we can't actually really prove who did and didn't use it. Like, we know for sure all the top times did. That's a no-brainer. But then how far down the list do you have to go? What about the person who got gold using that, but would have missed gold entirely without it? So we erred on the side of just letting everything go. It's kind of a very speedrun mentality. If you look at the actual, like, the hardcore console PC game speedrunning scene, it's half about glitches and just taking advantage of breaking the game in various ways. We kind of tried to embrace that to an extent. But clearly, the one thing that we'd like to change is the complete frantic rush that they've turned into, where CC is irrelevant except for AoE stun, AoE crowd control, like Solar Beam, AoE grip, etc.
Stun, interrupt.
Exactly.
There's no CC.
Right. Because CC slows you down, and you're better off trying to train through, hope that you get a good avoidance streak, or nail whatever you need to nail, get good crits to get up something down, and reset if you don't, versus taking it slow and steady and guaranteeing you're going to have a poor time. So I think that, that's something that we can target much more specifically with the challenge mode mechanics to really force you to pay more attention to individual mobs. Things that we aren't, abilities that we wouldn't necessarily put in the normal or heroic version of the dungeon, that have synergies between things, where one mob actually massively reduces the damage taken by others while it's active and not CC'd, or things that heal much more, that really force you to approach pulls more methodically, instead of just train through AoE it all down. The other big thing is tank vengeance not being a thing. That's going to be great all around, because
true, yeah.
It's going to definitely impact.
Pretty much, if you watch the top challenge mode runs these days,
it's a tank and 4 DPS.
Tremendous amount of vengeance abuse that's going on, and looking forward to that not happening. So yeah,
I see.
That sounds good.
Okay, so we're gonna see more mobs that we have to care about much more in CMs that aren't just chain stunned. Is the summary of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully. We can hope.
Right.
Pretty much.
Speaking about challenging content in that regard, going over to Twitter real quick here. Which, again, if you guys want to submit a question to us, the best way to do it during after show is on Twitter.
Yep.
So do
Tweet
it right
us.
there. You can obviously send us in emails and stuff like that before a show happens, but during a show, Twitter is the best avenue. So we have Affinity wants to ask about the PTR testing that's going to be happening before we actually get the live launch, because there's only one version of Mythic, one version of the hardest difficulty rating out right now with Mythic. Does it mean we're going to see more focused testing on that? And then just doing like the 10 to 25 man no more heroic stuff in like one big chunk, but then just more testing on Mythic content instead of like the 2 hours here, 2 hours there kind of stuff we had before?
Well, yes and no. Yes, we absolutely can get more focused and better testing.
Right.
No, it's not going to be more than 2 hour blocks, because we don't want you to practice the fights and learn the fights on PTR. That's not the point. We want to get the absolute bare minimum of exposure for us to get the information we need to tune them, rather than continuing to reinforce the fact that, there's this whole separate metagame and we need to have absolute fairness with our PTR hours and all of that, because it feeds into the world first progression race. So we want to minimize testing where possible, but there's no question that being able to focus on one mythic size as opposed to 10 and 25 separately will go a long way.
Okay. Yeah, I don't mean to add more time per boss, but it always felt like you guys had to really kind of dodge around where you tested things with 25 and 10 heroic wise. But now because you only have
10
one.
men got 2 hours, 25 men got half an hour. Most of it was taken up by server restarts. All of us on PTR know that that's exactly how it went. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was sort of wanting to say without being the bad cop.
It's okay. I'm the bad cop. It's what I'm here for.
It's okay. Let's go back over to the email right quick. We had some other questions that came in putting on the show beforehand. More of like a build-up show. Sios of Malfurion submitted this one, but I'm pretty sure Noble is concerned too. How much role do the lore and story play into building and designing of an encounter or an entire raid zone? And which comes first? Does an idea or the story come first?
They're tremendously important. And I think pretty much without exception, the lore and story is the first thing when it comes to building a raid zone as a whole. We are always thinking about the big picture story that we're telling over the course of an entire expansion, and what plot lines need to be resolved, who the major villain is going to be. Like in Cataclysm, we had this whole idea of, okay, you have Deathwing, dragons, Twilight's Hammer, elementals. And then the middle patch was the elemental portion of it. We knew it was going to be Firelands and Ragnaros. That was very much driven by the story. Then figuring out individual bosses beyond that is a mix of clear-cut story hits. Like we knew, okay, Archdruid Fandral had been introduced in questing. He's a really cool, high-profile villain. What if we have an evil fire druid? That's kind of a no-brainer. Then other things actually just often boil down to what would be cool to fight. Visual diversity, the just diversity of feel and mechanics in terms of size, council fight versus a single big enemy, and like continuing the Firelands, I guess, since I started there. A lot of the fights there were just things that sounded cool to us, like a huge firehawk that bursts out of an erupting volcano. Okay, that sounds kind of cool.
Let's do that.
A spider that has woven a web of filaments and strands of fiery webbing that is a canopy in a burned out forest. That's also kind of cool. A huge giant that's so big that you can't tell.
Oh, no. No, don't do that one. Okay. Well, that's cool. I guess people always want to kind of wonder about how that even works. Like, if you have like a dartboard, like, this is a cool idea, and that's a cool idea, or where you kind of roam together. I guess it kind of depends on the mechanic works with the story stuff. So that's cool to hear about. All right.
Are we going to expect in this expansion to level all the way up to level 100 to test all of the bosses that we'll be seeing? Again?
Nope. We have actually a system in place where we can scale your level up for the purposes of testing. So when people first start getting into alpha, then beta, you'll be level 90, obviously. You'll be testing level up content, but we'll have it so that if you zone into a level 100 dungeon, you're level 100 while you're in there. You have all your Draenor perks awarded to you. Gear scaled up accordingly. When you zone out, that reverts to your base state. We'd use the same thing for raids and before the level cap actually makes it all the way to 100. That way we can get as much feedback as early as possible.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I'm a really big fan of that because I love raid content, but I hate leveling on PTR. I'd like to experience it once. So the fact that you guys are going to use that scaling technology in that manner is very nice to hear.
That'll be good.
So I guess I had a question that I'd
okay.
like to ask you, Ian. Just if you could name, of all of the different things that you've worked on, especially over the course of Mists, if you could pull one thing out that you're most happy with, that you just really feel like went over well and improved the gaming experience for the maximum number of people, what would it be?
I mean, let's see. If I had to pick one, probably just flexible rating. And I think this is a system whose benefits have yet to be fully realized.
Right.
I think that expanding it to Warlords is going to be awesome in terms of potential, because of what it means for the experience of social groups and commitment and obligation and what signing up for raiding entails. Today, you always have this annoying balance of you need enough people around that you're not going to cancel your raid if someone no-shows, but then if they all show up, that's also bad because people have to sit on the bench. Like, as a raid leader, you're almost like crossing your fingers, hoping that a couple people don't show up so you don't have that problem. Like, it's always perfect when you have the exact right number. But the flip side of that means that if I want to join a raid group, I need a certain level of commitment. I need to be able to say, like, I'm going to be around 80% of the time. It's hard to just, drop in, drop out. But now, if you have a 14-player raid group, a 16-player raid group, and my friend wants to join, but he's like, oh, actually, I can only make one night a week. Is that okay? Well, honestly, as long as he, stays on top of the fights and knows what he's doing and is a decent player, which he very well may be, there's no reason not to bring him along when he's available. Whereas previously, you'd say, oh, sorry, if you can only make one night, we can't fit you in. Now, of course, this isn't really going to apply to, the hardcore mythic end of the spectrum, but for the vast majority of raiders out there, it's, a gigantic improvement and opens it up to people who can't carve out fixed time blocks on a certain night of the week consistently.
Yeah. Or even something that I've encountered recently where you're an EST person raiding with PST people and you're like, look, I can only stay up until 1 or 2 a.m. I can't stay up any later. And then in every other way that raids work previously, it's like, oh man, I'm letting the group down by being like, man, I have to go to sleep at 1 a.m. I've got work tomorrow, I have a job. But with Flex, that stress doesn't exist. It's like, oh, okay, I'm leaving, and the boss gets, a little bit easier. It's such a huge change to the way that raids
And also,
work.
I think everyone at every level of raiding has probably had the experience at some point or another where you had to cancel a raid because emergencies come up. It's like, okay, you knew it was kind of borderline to begin with, then someone is like, oh crap, I had an emergency at work, someone else's computer picks that night to blow up, and now you're shorthanded.
Yeah.
Again, once you get above that minimum floor, and we expect to see a lot of groups in the mid-teens, there's just a lot of security in knowing that, really, you're going to have a raid tonight, even if a couple people flake at the last minute, and that's pretty awesome.
So when did you actually come up with this idea for flex raids? I mean, I know you've talked a lot about how awesome flex raids are in other interviews, but I know that I remember you speaking about it on Convert to Raid about a year ago. Did you come up with it right about the time? Had you guys been having this as a concept, as far back as Cataclysm?
It's something that we've been thinking about as early as the very start of Mists. More as we knew that there was this ongoing struggle of 10 versus 25, and keeping them balanced, keeping that fair and maintaining the system. We were trying to figure out if there was a way out that was fair to all parties. One of the ideas that was kicked around was like, well, what if we could make it scale to people's raid size?
Yeah.
Initially, there was a lot of skepticism of how that would work for kind of harder content and whether we could really pull it off. I think that once we got later on in Mists and started realizing that we needed this extra raid difficulty to better serve friends and family raiders and groups that wanted something more serious and more organized than LFR, but weren't quite up to the challenge of the existing normal modes, that felt like a great place to try out Flex, because we could err on the side of having things simpler. And if it's like, okay, if we screw up and it's a little bit too easy with this number of people, okay, not the end of the world, no harm done. But I think that one of the things that came out of that, actually, as early as PTR, was the first iteration of, and I think this is something I've mentioned a couple times in the past, the first iteration of flexible rating on the PTR was overtuned, and we were scaling your gear down pretty far.
Right,
Okay.
But people went in there with like
remember.
18-person groups, 22-person groups, and it was way too hard for the intended audience of Flex, but it actually felt pretty much like, hey, this is like real rating, but with 22 people. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the proof of concept that got the wheels turning, that like, okay, we'll try this in 5.4, but if this goes well and we think it's going to, we can expand this and make this the way rating works by default in 6.0. And that's where we're at.
No, it's awesome. I told you beforehand that I thought that was a pretty amazing thing, because I don't think any MMO out there does that. You have your whatever size your raids are, and that's it, right? There's no middle ground. You either have to hit that mark or you don't get to raid. And you can't underman it usually, because the gear, obviously the content is tuned for those people. So it's cool to have, at least now going into Draenor, you got 3 modes of that will be able to, obviously one of them will obviously automatically fill up and whatnot, but the other 2 you have control over, that you can raid with up to 30 people if you guys can work all that stuff out, up 25 if you don't. So that's a pretty amazing thing. And then, the hardcore people get their own one ladder. So I think it's going to be awesome.
Are you concerned at all about tuning it for, I suppose, what is today's normal mode? What is going to be in Warlords, the heroic mode?
Not really. I think
you guys are very confident?
I think so. I think that, again, normal mode there's a much broader spectrum there of players that it's meant to serve, and the tuning doesn't need to be as razor sharp precise. As long as it's doable by the audience,
right,
it's fine if on some fights bringing a few extra people is acceptable or makes it a bit easier. That's not the audience that's going to min-max in the same way. The problem with Mythic is it's the combination of A, we need the tuning to be like razor precise, and B, it's the exact audience that is going to min-max the hell out of it. They are going to bring 16 people to one fight and 22 to another and 12 to another, if that's the best way to do it, and that's just miserable.
Yeah. Okay.
Understood.
I'm gonna run over to Twitter real quick here. Tiggs asks, how do you feel about the Tiggs.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
How do you feel about the legendary model, how it worked in Mists, and what lessons you've learned to be used in Warlords?
Yeah,
I guess if you even want to drop, are we even going to get any legendary stuff in Warlords? I guess it's a 2-part question.
Sure. So overall, I think more upsides than downsides. Definitely some mistakes, definitely some lessons learned. I think it's something we're likely to build upon and continue doing in some form in Warlords. We're planning on it, at least. I think the main mistakes were the 5.1 portion of it, the Valor, even after we reduced it, still was, it just was kind of gratuitous and flat, whereas the other things were participation rewards for content that you were likely to be doing anyway. That I think ended up just feeling like a pure gratuitous grind, and to some extent it was. Kind of could just really apologize for that. There really isn't much more to say there. The pacing of the legendary reward in 5.4 was also a little bit problematic. Like, I think it actually worked really well as a boost for people that were still working on a tier partway through that tier, all the other times that it occurred. Whereas in 5.4, everyone had their legendary cloaks, assuming you were ready for them, the day heroic opened, and that was part of the tuning challenge for us. Is compared to Throne of Thunder, all the first guilds that progressed through Throne of Thunder and got their world first, did all their hardcore progression, did so without legendary metagems. And then there was that period, like 8 weeks or whatever into 5.2, when people suddenly started getting the legendary metas, and it's like a 5% DPS increase across the board to your raid. It's like having that flat zone-wide nerf, but it's more organic, and you feel it more. It's more impactful on a personal level. So I think we would prefer to avoid ever giving you whatever your next step of power is right at the start of a tier, and always make it so that it's something that's at least a few weeks in.
Okay. How about something totally different?
I have a kind of totally different question, Bay.
Okay.
You can go first if you want to.
Well, mine should be pretty quick. Do you guys plan to have the 6.0 patch on live for to give like 10-man guilds, because we will the raid Mythic Siege of Orgrimmar at that time? How long do you think we're going to be able to have that? Is it going to be a month, 6 weeks? What do you think? What are you guys hoping for 6.0 on live?
Somewhere in that ballpark, like
Okay.
4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
Both to let people get adjusted to the new changes, let us test the new changes,
Right.
and looking forward to that. Actually, one really quick follow-up based on something I just saw in chat on the Legendary. Alts. That's something I meant to address and forgot to.
Oh, yes.
So
Okay.
I think also something that we probably regret is the fact that you had to redo all of the grindy parts of the quest chain as a whole on any characters you wanted to do it on.
Yeah.
Like, I think if we could go back and do it again, it would be more like once you did it once on your main, on your alts, you could skip the grinds. You would still have to do the one-shot events, like the Thunder Forge thing or the Celestial Trials with Rathion, but you wouldn't actually have to get your 3,000 Valor on an alt or a whole bunch of drops, because you've already kind of proven that you can do that once. You don't need to repeat that multiple times on multiple characters.
Yeah.
I see. Well, that's definitely going to be something nice to hear for anyone who's farmed out the Legendary on multiple alts.
Oh, I don't know
Yes.
where my paladin's
As
somewhere
you know,
getting
many of us
coins or
have.
something.
I mean, it's not something we're changing retroactively, so don't shed tears over having done that, but more about a lesson learned for the future.
Telling players not to shed tears is a battle you're going to lose, Ian, just saying.
Well, try not to. Don't shed too many. I mean, because ultimately, it's also
Still
not
got to
just
have the
alts.
servers moving.
It's not just alts. It's about it's about people who wanted to switch mains sometimes, and suddenly realize like, oh, I have this huge insurmountable thing that I have to catch up before I can viably switch and contribute to my raid, which is frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely it is. What's yours, Anna?
So here's a question for you, Ian. I know you're a big beer enthusiast. Can you tell us a little bit about the most excellent beer that you have consumed recently?
This is an important question. Absolutely.
Critically important question.
Love it. Okay. Go.
Let's see. Okay, so the most excellent beer I've
He's like a
consumed recently.
serious enthusiast too. I mean, like this guy like drives
Southern
many hours to
Southern
go get the
California
most
is
excellent
like
beers.
the cradle of craft beer. I'm sure chat's gonna be raging. Like, this isn't a raid question. I want to hear about raids and nothing but raids.
Chat can rage.
Most recently, probably about a month and a half ago, I was in Boston for a beer festival called the Extreme Beer Fest, run by Beer Advocate there. It's something I go to like every year. It's kind of like a pseudo guild meetup. It's a fun thing to do. And there's an amazing brewery that's about 5 hours north of Boston, up in the hills of Vermont, called Hill Farmstead. And so some friends and I, we rented a car, drove all the way out into deep snowbanks, and went to this little farmhouse where there's this like savant who makes some of the best beer in the world. And it's, wait in line for an hour. You get your like few taster glasses, your one bottle you're allowed to have. It's kind of like the Seinfeld soup Nazi of beer. But yeah, it was memorable, worth every bit of the drive, worth having the car break down and having it take like another 12 hours to get back to Boston. Even with all of that, no regrets.
No regrets.
No regrets.
You got stuck in a snowbank?
Pretty much, yeah. It's yeah. I mean, it actually turned out okay. It was a little bit scary initially. Like, car rental brakes locked up and steering gave out just in the middle of a road in the middle of nowhere, as luck would have it.
Sorry, I guess it's not that funny.
It's funny now because I'm here. The car broke down. Like, there was no cell phone reception because it was really the middle of nowhere. But it happened to be right in front of a mechanic's house, and that kind of worked out well.
And you had excellent beer. I mean, it sounds like a great day to me.
There you go.
No, because, here's what you don't want to do when your car goes off the road into a snowbank. Open up your beer and start drinking it. Then when the officer comes along, it's like, no, officer, honest, our car, it locked up, and we drove off the road. Really, it wasn't our fault at all. Ignore the fact that we're all drunk and smell like beer. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like not a very good plan.
What have you done, Anna? It's okay.
Anyway, I mean, Bay, go ahead and ask a raid relevant question.
Well, the last
That's all
one
I got for now.
I don't know. That's a pretty good one to end on. I think that might be that could be literally the end of the after show. There was a couple of tweets that came in that were kind of relevant when we were going about legendary stuff. People are really concerned about not necessarily transmogging into your old legendaries, but transmogging away from them because they don't want to see certain effects. Like mostly it comes around with the legendary cloaks.
Yeah, most of us are really tired of looking at that cloak.
Oh my god, please. I hate
Sorry, I've looked at the same one.
The melee one too, especially if you're a two-hander, like because it makes your attack swing 0.5 seconds for those 3 seconds. You literally have a seizure, and it happens a lot, and it's not the best. So
well, a couple of separate issues there. The legendary cloak visual, that's a little bit overbearing, particularly when there's 25 people who all have them in a raid. We know that. Like, it's trying to strike a balance between it feeling awesome when you're out questing or soloing stuff, and it procs, and you kind of see it, and having that happen with 20 people all around. I think some of our spell visual filtering and improvements should help with that, and I think certainly we're going to be much more mindful anytime we want to attach an awesome visual to a legendary that's going to be used in raid combat. At some point, the coolness of your legendary visual is outweighed by the nuisance of having things that are obscuring seeing other mechanics that are going on. The transmog thing is tricky. It's kind of where we've drawn a line in terms of just the pure artistic call of these really super distinctive weapons that we want everyone to know that you're wielding because they have unique gameplay effects, and it's like transmogging your legendary so that it looks like a pitchfork or vice versa. Either of those feels a bit wrong to us. It's not like completely set in stone. The book is closed. We will never revisit this decision.
Right.
But no immediate plans to change that going forward into Warlords, at least.
I see.
Okay.
And I guess just as a follow up to what you had just said there. Oh, actually, you said that you had a follow. You know what? I had a follow up to what you just said there, and then it just flew right out of my head. So never mind. I don't know. Bae, did you have another question?
The one other one I could think of was that people were wondering if we're going to see any more class-specific quest lines, a la the Warlock one in Warlords. Mostly because of its very shamanistic expansion. Sorry. Something caught in my throat.
No, class-specific quest lines are really cool. I mean, I know Paladins have a couple of them, and Shaman have had a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no specific plans to announce, but it's something that we very much have on the table. I think it's when we have something that is awesome that we would like to deliver in a way that feels like it befits a quest line, we'll do it. We want to definitely set the expectation that there isn't like a rotation. It's not like, oh, it's this class's turn to get one or that class's turn to get one. Because if we start down that road, ultimately that's going to lead to us not doing any of them. Because if we feel like, if you bring one, you have to bring one for the whole class, then you just stop bringing cookies. And we'd like to just kind of have a custom solution when it makes sense, but nothing specific to announce.
Okay.
Oh, I remembered what my follow-up was now. Because I haven't spent any of this time since 4 p.m. It's been 2.5 hours, and I haven't gotten on your case about spell effect overload yet. So, let's talk about spell effect overload. Can you please give me some example of something that will make me feel better about the upcoming expansion with regard to spell effect overload in Melee? And I'm just going to tell you right now that I've heard the answer of, oh, we're tuning down X, Y, and Z ability. And I heard that answer last year, and all it really meant was you guys tuned down like the neon green Warlock Fire to be like perhaps 50% of neon green. And that was pretty much the only change that I ever noticed. So...
But that also did reduce your screen clutter by like 50% because Warlocks were that obnoxious at the time.
Well,
I mean, I guess that's true, and we did have 4 Warlocks in the raid at that time. So.
Right.
When you have Warlocks with green fire on Horadon and you're doing the Poison Gate, not fun times for anybody. But no, so I think this time we're taking another step far beyond that.
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
I would say it's a 3-pronged approach. Maybe 2 prongs. Maybe I can think of a third. I forget. Anyway, at least a couple things that we're doing. There are some visuals still that are disproportionately noisy. So yeah, 3 prongs. Okay. There's some visuals that are disproportionately noisy for what information they're conveying. Couple of examples. Holyward Sanctuary. Compare Holyward Sanctuary to Healing Rain. They're exactly the same mechanic, more or less. Holyward Sanctuary is 1,000 times louder and more likely to distract and conflict with other information that's going on your screen. Moonfire is something that functionally it's more or less a dot. It has very similar gameplay to something like Corruption and Shadowward Pain, but it looks like a tactical nuclear strike when it lands. Not necessarily ideal. So some of those visuals are just getting adjusted. Another thing that we're doing is having alternate visuals for the caster versus other members of a raid that are allies, for things that are meant to feel epic to the caster, but don't need that full epicness to be perceived by everybody else. In the WoW source that we did a month and a half ago, we showed off some of the mage visuals, for example. And you have Mage Meteor or Comet Storm, where the mage sees the full set of impacts, but other people in the raid are seeing a much more toned-down, muted version. But I think the final and biggest thing that we've never done before is actually we have a programmatic, complete system where we are assigning every single spell visual in the game a number that correlates to its importance in terms of information that it conveys. Power Word Barrier or Anti-Magic Zone are priority 1. You always want to see those. You always need to see those. If you don't see the Anti-Magic Zone, that's significantly impacting your gameplay negatively. You need to understand there. The impact when a heal happens that lands on your ally, really low priority. The blue glow on the hands of the Frost Mage as he's prepping his Frostbolt, really low priority. And then anytime, rather than, because part of our concern has always been, like, we don't want to wash out spell visuals when you're solo or in small group settings, because there actually isn't information overload, it just kind of feels suitably good and epic. But whenever a certain threshold is crossed of a certain amount going on the screen, which will always be crossed in large raid environments, we're basically going to cull all the visuals that are below a certain priority threshold. And that will be dynamic based on how much is going on. So
awesome.
You will only be seeing the highest information, most important visuals, and obviously anything the boss does in PvP, anything your enemies are doing. This is simply about your allies' actions. And we think that's going to make a gigantic difference, both in terms of just client performance, in terms of getting better FPS without needing an amazing graphics card, but also being able to actually see what's going on your screen, particularly if you're melee.
How about if everybody lights up? And I know that this is a very specific question, but it's one of my number one irritants, is that when anyone pops a raid cooldown, every single person in the raid lights up like a light bulb. Tell me that's going away.
In some cases, it may be. In other cases, like or Mastery Devotion or whatever, it lets you know that it's happened. Like there isn't another clear, like the way you know that someone has just popped Devo is that you see that holy impact on all of your raid for 1 second. I don't know if that's something that happens so often in a fight that it's seriously why you can't see the fire in melee. It's more kind of the other stuff that's going on. Impacts, though, from just getting hit by beneficial effects, I agree in general, are not very informative and are more often than not just noise. I think there are 1 or 2, though, that are recognizable and do communicate important information.
Great.
Okay.
Now, just to summarize that then, we are not getting anything toggleable in our settings that will determine how much friendly information that we see. It's all being done automatically by you guys, by what
there is
what
going to be a very thorough and aggressive regime of culling visuals. You can toggle that off if you want to see everything. I suspect.
But I mean, I know PvP players really want to see everything because they care a lot about all of these visual effects.
Yes,
and I want them to have that option.
Yes, no. This basically the default will be that we cull a lot, and you can toggle it off if you want to see everything. But we're not looking into the set of checkboxes and sliders where you can hide all these different things individually, because ultimately, to some extent, that's a trap for some people to fall into. It also, we have a certain aesthetic look for a game that we want to preserve. And
with everyone lighting up all the time and not being able to see anything in melee, I know that.
Exactly.
I feel very strongly about that aesthetic effect. I love it.
Yes, and that's the part that we're going to fix for you, right?
Okay.
But we don't want people turning everything off, where some people might, right? The same way, if you look at like a StarCraft Pro, they often play on min settings across the board because they don't care about things looking pretty. They just want like maximum clarity, maximum FPS. Every FPS counts.
Correct.
If the way that high-end raid streamers play the game is where you can't see anyone around you doing anything, you just kind of see people standing there and nothing really is coming out of their hands. Doesn't even look like people fighting a boss. But you have tons of, you have perfect clarity of information. We don't think that's an improvement, and we want to stop short of that. this will be a major improvement over what you're used to. This isn't just, oh, we tweaked a couple of visuals. This is a big deal. So
It's awesome.
All right.
wait
No,
and see.
I
And
believe-
I look forward to your feedback on what continues to sound, noisiest and what continues to look noisiest and most distracting once it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's
We
something
will.
that I know that we care very much about, and I'm sure that we'll all give you the PTR feedback that you guys are looking for.
I think we have plenty
Indeed.
of people that'll give us PTR feedback that we're looking for. Yeah, absolutely. That should be really good then. I think that should be about it. A little bit longer of an after show, but I think we should be okay. Thank you everyone that did tweet in your questions. Of course, we can't get to all of them, and some of them are just kind of like super trolly, but we talked about beer, all right? So I think we're good. But the button is
We had
down.
our priorities straight.
They have priorities straight. That's right. That's right. Totally. It's fine. All right. The man of the hour, Mr. Ian Hazzikostas. Thank you again, sir, for being on the show. You guys can go follow him on Twitter right here at WatcherDev for, of course, more tweets and awesomeness. We did also have Bashiok in the channel tonight and Celestalon. But again, sir, thank you for being on here. It was awesome.
No, it was a pleasure. Glad to talk to you guys. Great questions. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We'll have to do this again sometime after.
Definitely come back and
Yeah.
talk to us again, especially after we've had some significant testing go on Alpha with some of the raid encounters that you guys have
Yeah.
installed. I'm really excited to see all the stuff that y'all have for Warlords.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm excited for you to see it also. So,
And then
soon.
there's Anafel over there on the Twitter at Anafel. You can go follow
On
her.
the Twitter at anafield.com, you can go there and tell me about all of the mean things that I said to your favorite developers today.
Oh gosh. Oh, I'll have to check your feed later to see if that actually happens.
It does. It does.
Yep. And then of course there's me. You can find all of my personals and socials on twitch.tv BayTLM. That's where you will see all this stuff in the future, of course. Ann and I will be doing Warlords beta streams and stuff like that on this channel as well. And next week, again, is Disc Holy Priests with Drevka and Derevka. We are looking still for a guest.
Unknown right now.
Huh? We're looking for one more priest to be on. We just haven't been able to find and lock one down. Sometimes it's hard to get guests. It's a bit of a task to do that. So if you have priest questions, send them in right now. The links are down below. You can go follow us on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube for all of our past episodes. This one will be up online tomorrow by about 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll also have transcripts, and there's also notes on MMO Champion as well from the show. So depending on how you want to digest this whole episode, you can do it. You can watch the VODs of both the main and the after show, and of course read tons of text. But you guys were awesome today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will see you next week. For everyone behind the scenes at Final Boss, thank you very much for watching. Have fun at work this week. Trust in the coin. And until later, guys, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
You can say bye, Ian.
Bye, and have fun writing that transcript.
There you go. Oh, poor Megan.
Good night.